So this is the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6, the big brother of course the Sony Xperia 10 Mark 6 that I'm currently testing as well. Back at the same time, just making a first impression for both of them. Of course, it does have some features over the Sony Xperia 10 Mark 6, but also some changes compared to the previous Sony Xperia 1. So let's discuss my impressions, first impressions on the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6. So let's begin with something that is needed to be said when it comes to the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6. A phone that I really want to do well. A phone that is aimed at photographers. But from the get-go I will say they made some choices that I question. For instance, the camera hardware and of course software. But the software part I will leave for the full review because I feel like there I need to experience it longer. Now, when it comes to the hardware, the main sensor didn't change and I'm not too fussed about that one. I really like the main sensor on the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 5. The periscope, however, with of course the continuous optical zoom allowing for optical ranges between 3.5 and 7.1, in this case has no sensor change, with an f-stop between 2.3 and a 3.5. But this is the sensor compared to the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 5 I really wanted to see a difference on. This sensor in my experience on that Sony Xperia 1 Mark 5 wasn't that great. So not seeing a change here is quite a bit of a shame. Of course I'm gonna test it longer and then give you a proper impression, but this is the one that I really wanted to see a pretty good upgrade for. But I still love the continuous optical zoom. And of course the ultra wide is the same again, no changes there whatsoever. Anyway, let's dive into the point of view photography and my first impressions with the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6. Now what I often do when it comes to the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6 is use Pro Mode, keep everything the same but change the EV around. So I have the rest automatic, change the EV around to get it closer to my style. And of course shoot it with RAW JPEG. So you get a RAW and a JPEG format of the image itself. That's how I normally shoot it, and I try to keep it at 48mm because simply put, I think 85 is just way too sharp for images when it comes to said Sony Xperia. Let's see, there. Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6. But this I really like. What I could do here is go through this when it comes to the camera itself. Use a zoom, just create a lot of focus on the flower on the back, like so. I love that contrast. Again, what I could do here is use those green leaves as a depth of field focus on the subject that I'm actually trying to capture, again pushing your focus towards the flower itself. And what I really like on this shot is the contrast. There's a shadow on this side, you get a bright sun hitting the flower itself, really good contrast, and then you can create some depth with having these flowers in the bouquet. By the way, me having it that low in the EV should tell you quite a bit about the approach that I have when it comes to photography in general. There you go. Ooh, thank you, B. It's kind of you to join. I think a phone like the Sony Xperia will really excel is that natural feel, although I would turn down the brightness when it comes to this one. But when it comes to that natural feel, that feel of photography, here's what Sony is really good at. And of course you do have a 3.5mm headphone jack. Using that creates better audio. Using a Bluetooth where I'm listening to Elton John right now doesn't compare to something where you actually use a 3.5mm headphone jack, especially when it comes to the microphone quality. And if you record video and you want to use that, that's much better than something that has a Bluetooth connection. It's just not on par. It really isn't. I prefer using this right now than using my Xiaomi to use the Bluetooth headset. 3.5 just simply is much better. It factually is, especially for my quality. By the way, let's continue the video instead of rambling on. Now this is a shot where you want to use the ultra wide. So what I'm going to do is right here, you see that leaf right there, and of course the trees above it. Creates such a good focus point, especially with the moss around the tree trunk itself. Right here you see all that moss. It just creates such a nice effect. And use the ultra wide here because again it just creates a unique view, like so. That's cool, I like that. Here you can potentially see what I mean when it comes to focus. It's just struggling with that a lot more. Just tap on it. like I can rely more on, for instance, the Xiaomi. Here, as you can see, the focus isn't there, even though it said it had it on that point. It didn't. So you need to use manual focus, I feel like, more often than I would like it to be. Now when it comes to Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6, is you have a sort of macro, right? With the telephoto. It works decent in terms of how you use it, which is really difficult to film, by the way. Let me see if I hold it like this, just to give a better indication. It's right here, you can slide this to point your focus, and of course you have then that as well, so you can see the peak focus with a yellow indicator. But the downside is that this doesn't often collaborate with where the focus actually is. When it comes to the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6, there are a lot of changes when it comes to the mobile phone experience. For one, of course, the phone itself isn't as thin anymore. It's a little bit wider and a little bit shorter compared to the previous generation. There are some changes software related as well, and I'm not 100% sure if I agree with that approach from Sony. Sony always has been that more for the pro photographer or someone who's trying to be a pro photographer and get that approach where you get that feel in there, if that makes sense. Sony still does that really well, and so far from my experience with it as well, they still do that really well. It's just the approach in terms of software experience, it's very different and it feels more limited compared to the previous generation. But you're still able to capture some really good shots. Good shots. But you're still able to get some good shots overall when it comes to the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6. But we're gonna test it more in the future, of course, and see how it does there.
So of course, this is my first impression video. We're gonna test it out more when it comes to the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6. There are things and changes that I like. I know that not everyone is going to agree with the new format when it comes to the display ratio, but for myself it feels fine in the hand. Again, the fingerprint scanner is easy to reach, and overall the content is perfectly fine on it as well. I don't necessarily need a 4K display, so I'm fine with it. The brightness is a little bit better as well compared to the previous generation, and it is noticeable, especially outside in the sun itself. There I felt like the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 5 didn't perform as well, so in terms of that it's definitely an upgrade. But when it comes to the hardware of the camera sensors, there I'm questioning what they are doing. For instance, the periscope is one of the weaker ones when it comes to just the capabilities of it. I really like the continuous zoom that you can get with it. It's a really nice idea and a nice implementation. But they need to improve on the sensor itself when it comes to, of course, the periscope. Allowing you to have a different focal length while retaining the optical zoom of it is a nice idea. It just needs to be executed well to get the best result out of it. And with this one, I'm not too sure about it, because simply put again, it's the same sensor as we had in the previous generation. And the previous generation, when it comes to that sensor, didn't impress me that much. But we are going to have to test it out, because as we know, it's not all down to hardware. It's also down to how they implicate the software of it and how it, of course, does the computational photography. Even though Sony is one of the ones that doesn't do it as much. Either way, let me know what you think about the Sony Xperia 1 Mark 6. What do you think of the change of the ratio, the display ratio? What do you think about having not a 4K panel anymore? And of course, what do you think about the software changes when it comes to it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you aren't subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe. We're really close to, of course, the 10,000 subscribers. We're about 800 away. So thank you very much for that. And hopefully we can grow to it and maybe reach that next month. Or maybe before it if you subscribe now. Anyway, have a good one and talk to you guys in the next.